I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurrundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video for you where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. I'm going to jump into the stats in a minute, but first I wanted to show you something that I was approached by a Sydney-based company to share something with everyone, and I'm very excited because you guys know how much I love reading off my Kindle. I have always had either a Kindle case or I've been most recently using a pop socket on here, but I was approached by Strapsicle, which is, as I said, a Sydney-based company who make straps for Kindles, and they very kindly sent me one and a discount code for everyone, which I will leave on the screen and link down below. But essentially these are like silicone straps for your Kindle so that you don't drop it. I ended up getting the purple one and it comes with two straps. There is a left and a right strap, and essentially all you do is you hook it onto the corners like so, and then you can slide your hand in it and this thing does not fall out, like ever. And if you want to make it super secure, you can pop the other one on the other side and you can have it like a little cross, like that. And I've been really loving this. I've been using it for about a week now and it has been super handy because I can literally hold it in one hand and tap the screen. My hand is nowhere near the buttons at the bottom of the screen. Look, it's only 2 fingers and it's not falling out. That is super handy. So if you are someone who is not a huge fan of pop sockets, I know lots of people are and that's totally fine, this is a good alternative for you, and I just thought it was really cool and I was very appreciative when they reached out to me. I'll probably be buying myself one in another color as well at some point. I will leave a link to their website down below. If you use the code Steph, you get 15% off, and they have 4 different colors. There is blue, mint green, the purple, and a hot pink, and they've got sizes for most Kindle models from 2011 onwards except the Oasis, as well as some Kobo models, and they are in production for some other devices as well, so you can definitely check out more information on their website. So thank you very much to Lou from Strapsicle for sending me one of these. It's been a lot of fun to have a play and try it out, and I'm very much in love with it. And before I start talking about the books, I do want to welcome Kerry D, who is the newest member of the channel. We're very glad to have you here. But yes, this is my reading week from the 10th until the 17th of September. I read a total of 9 things during this week. It was also birthday week and also the last week of term, so things got a little bit hectic, but you know what, we're here, we're fine. We're going to talk about the books that I read. Those 9 books equated to 2,203 pages, and my yearly reading total is 434 books. So I had one reread this week. I reread Their Vicious Darling by Nikki and Crowe for the live show that I was part of on Izzy's channel. I will leave that linked down below as well for those people who missed it. This is the 3rd book in the Vicious Lost Boys series. It is a bit of a wide shoes Peter Pan retelling, which has a very interesting mythology, and I have already talked about it once recently, so I'm going to leave that linked on the screen and not spend too much time on it. What I do want to say this time around is that rereading it made me love the dynamic between Croc and Hook even more in this story, and I'm very, very intrigued to see where that goes. Not convinced it's going to be in the next book, but it might be a spin-off, which I would very much appreciate because their dynamic in this book was what made the book for me. Then I picked up a book by Louisa, who is an Australian author, and I read started reading one of her paranormal romance dragon shifter books because I'm going to see her at Books Insight in Melbourne in a couple of weeks, and I thought I'm interested in this, so might as well read it. It is an dragon shifter paranormal series. It is called Dragons Ever After, and it is the first book in her Hebe Dragon series. And when I started reading, what I realized really quickly is it is the first book in a spin-off from another series, which I then went back and read this week. But I'm going to start here because this is the first book that I started with. We start off with a character called Percy, who is the former Lucifer in this world. So this is a world set on Earth, and paranormal creatures exist, but they're keeping their identities secret and hidden from the rest of the world. There is a paranormal species government called the Government of Species, and they sort of work in conjunction with human governments in order to keep this a big secret. Percy was the head of that government on Earth, and he held the title of Lucifer. But at the start of this book, he's no longer Lucifer. He is moving around the world trying to just, live a little and get some space from constantly being in charge of people, which when you read the first series, which I'll talk about in a minute, he was sort of coordinating chaos. And it's all going well until at the very start of this book, a young dragon crash lands on the shed of the place that he is renting and basically flattens it. It turns out this dragon shifter is an adolescent and has somehow made a very, very long journey from his home. And so Percy helps him out by calling his his parents, and then this adolescent dragon's father and the leader of the dragon shifters on Earth turn up to collect him because children to them are precious. They really struggle to procreate often, and so any young dragon is really special to them. Percy is a feline shifter, so they have felid and canine shifters, and they're not like Earth cats and dogs and things like that. They have those features but are other, so that's why they're not called werewolves or whatever. It turns out that Percy and Brant, who is the leader of the dragons, have this connection, and they have this little flirting moment while Brant's there to pick up the wayward teen, and Brant invites him to come and visit him the next time that he's in the States. Percy is currently in Western Australia. That's what happens. Percy decides to say, to hell with it. He's worked with Brant before, he's attracted to him, and he wants to get to know him better. And all of their friends agree because they have many friends in common. And it's their story, and it's kind of bonkers, crazy, off the wall, hilarious kind of thing. Percy ends up going to visit Brant. He ends up staying in this big house that is full of dragon shifters who are all just a little bit quirky. And yeah, it's really fun. There's some funny things that get thrown in there, like little catchphrases that just keep popping up. And while Percy was trying to talk himself up into going to visit Brant for the first time, he's sitting at the gates trying to decide whether he's going to let himself in, and he ends up saying the phrase "naked dragon rides," and one of the other dragons overhears it, and so no one ever lets him live it down. And it was just so funny. And it was so lighthearted, which is what I needed this week, which is why I went back and read the Hidden Species series, which are the first 4 books plus a novella that take place before this. These are not dragon shifter ones, and in fact the dragons don't really come into it until book 4. So the first book in Hidden Species is Demons Do It Better. This one is a grumpy sunshine sort of romance. This is where we meet the community of species government. We have Sam, who is a human who is blissfully unaware of the paranormal world, but he goes for a job at the office of the CSG, which is the Community of Species Government, as an administrative assistant. Now, they've never previously hired humans to work with them. They have humans who are in their inner circle and who know about them, but they don't typically hire them to work in their spaces. But Sam is very good at his job. He is hired, and he is put in charge of coordinating an investigative team who go out to sort out any paranormal misdemeanors and things like that that are going on. And that is Sam's introduction to this world. But when he finds out that, the paranormal world exists, he kind of has this existential crisis moment. And before he accepts the job, he goes out to a bar and he ends up having a one-night stand with this guy called Gideon. It's fantastic, but in the morning, Gideon is gone, and Sam doesn't think anything of it until he goes into the office and he finds out that Gideon is one of the people who works there. And in fact, he's quite high up in the organization. He is part of the top investigative team, and now he won't talk to Sam. He won't even make eye contact with him. And so Sam spends the next 5 years ignoring Gideon until Sam receives a promotion where he has to work with Gideon's team. And the two are forced to work together and have to sort out their issues and, force grumpy demon Gideon to, maybe acknowledge that he's made the entire thing awkward. And there is sort of this overarching thread through the entire series about a sorcerer who has gone rogue, and in this book is kidnapping pregnant couples from the magical world and is potentially experimenting on the fetuses, so be aware of that going into it. There is a novella called Naughty Neil that is book 1.5. This follows Agent Mark, who I think is a Hellhound shifter, which I'll explain about the Hellhounds in a minute, who is sent out to investigate a supernatural paranormal creature who is leaking their magic all over their street. And as it turns out, there is a guy called Neil who works in a strip club who is a succubus but doesn't actually realize that he is, because no one's ever told him. He thinks he's human, and he's in a role that's totally suited to what he needs as a paranormal being, so it's never really come up. Mark is the one to break it to him, and then Neil has to learn more about this world. So it's kind of like a little cute bridging Christmas novella, and it was very short and very fun. The second book in the Hidden Species series is One Bite with a Vampire. This one is Andrew's book. Andrew is an 800-year-old vampire who basically acts like a teenager because he's gotten to the point in his life where he's like, well, I'm just going to be me and everyone else around me can deal with it. And he ends up developing this crush and connection with a guy called Noah, who was rescued in the first book. Noah is in his early 20s. He has a very smart mouth and does not put up with rubbish from anyone, and he gets picked on quite a bit for being a human in the office by some of the other species, and Andrew will not stand for it. They then discover that Noah may have some human magic in him, and they decide to explore that. Obviously, the main problem in the story is that Noah's former captor, because he was kidnapped in the first book, resurfaces, and the team are desperately trying to track down this rogue sorcerer to stop him from whatever it is he's trying to do. What I really liked about this is Andrew is totally ridiculous and over the top, and it was just funny. I don't know whether it's the Australian humour that I'm picking up on or whether it was just so lighthearted and ridiculous that that's what I needed. And the same goes with the other books. So book 3 is Hijinks with the Hellhound. Now Hellhounds are canid shifters, but somewhere in the past the story goes that canine shifters have really warped senses of humor. They love to party, they love karaoke, they love having fun. They're totally ridiculous and over the top, even more so than Andrew. And somewhere in the past, someone nicknamed them a hellhound because they were just driving everyone crazy. And the canine shifters loved that name so much that they adopted that as their species name. So now they're known as hellhounds, even though they're not actually hellhounds. They're just canine shifters with very outgoing personalities. And so the hellhound in this story is Alistair, who is Sam's best friend. But Alistair is very, very over the top. He just loves his people. He's like, the hellhounds, if you are their people, they will just smother you in love and spend all the time over at your place. They don't know about personal boundaries, but they will do anything for you. Alistair ends up working on a case with Aiden, who is a feline shifter and is the head of the shifter species. And so there is this little power dynamic, and also Alistair is holding a grudge on Aiden from something that happened in the first book, and so the two are forced to work together and maybe realize an attraction to one another. Also, anytime Alistair is involved, there is usually karaoke. And then the fourth and final book in the Hidden Species series is Sorcerers Always Satisfy, and this follows David, who is a very powerful sorcerer. He's basically the right hand to Lucifer. So that's Percy from the book that I was talking about earlier. David is his right hand man, and he basically keeps everything running. He helps to manage the place, and he sort of receives a forced promotion in this book to actually recognize the fact that he's doing all of this work and he needs to be paid officially for that role. And in this one, elves and dragons from an alternate realm are seeking refuge on Earth because their world is collapsing, and David is part of the group that is there to help smooth that transition of these two races onto Earth and to help them get acclimated to Earth and help them hide in plain sight. He is helped in this by an elf called Kulin, who we met in the third book. And Kulin sort of made things awkward in the third book because he declared his love and attraction to David in front of everyone, because that's what elves do. They recognize people and they don't lie. They say it how it is. And David is uncomfortable with that because he is used to being alone. He doesn't really do relationships and he's been burnt in the past. But when it comes time to have their final showdown with the big bad, who's been running through the whole series, who is also in league with someone who is helping to bring about the downfall of the elves and the dragons, David and Kulin have to work together and spend quite a bit of time sort of sorting out their feelings for one another. And Kulin is just this total cinnamon roll of a character who is just joyous and fun. And I really enjoyed this series overall because it was so lighthearted. It was like there was some serious things going on, but it was not a serious series, and I was totally here for that this week. My physical book off my TBR this week was Heatwave by TJ Klune. So this is the one that my members voted on. So it came down this week between Heatwave and Office Hours by Katrina Jackson, so I'll be reading that next week. This is the third and final book in the Extraordinary series by TJ Klune. It is a young adult superhero series. It is an MM romance. There is also a sapphic romance in here. In this one, our protagonist Nick Bell has taken on the role of Guardian, which was a role that his mother had. In this one, he's learning how to be Guardian, he's learning how to use his powers, and he is learning all of this alongside his boyfriend Seth, who is also an Extraordinary, and their two friends, and also their families who are now involved because they all know the secret. But when Simon Burke, who is the big bad in the series, threatens the existence of every Extraordinary, they have to work out a way to stop him because they have a very clear no killing rule, and he just seems to be gunning for them, and they can't work it out because these are teens and even their parents are still sort of struggling with this because none of the parents have powers or abilities. It's just two of the kids. I did really enjoy this as a conclusion, and in fact I loved the last part of the book so much, but I did find that the pacing was a little bit off, particularly in the first half of the book, and there's also a character and a character reveal that is confusing to the characters in the book but was also confusing to me, and I spent the first part of the book second guessing myself, but once I got past that I was fine. I'm glad that I read it. I think this series is really fun. I think it has some interesting commentary. There was a lot of criticism of the first book because it does deal with hero worship of the police, and the second and third book really deal with why that is problematic. And the whole series itself just honestly feels very young adult in tone. I haven't read something this YA in a while. It was fun. I like the characters, and I like that Nick, who is a teen with ADHD, has people around him who understand him and who accept who he is without getting frustrated with the fact that he'll just blurt out anything that comes into his head whenever he feels like it. But be aware of that because that does happen. Also, these books are awesome because the reverse jackets are so cool. But yes, that is Heatwave. And then the last thing that I read this week was Ladies on Top, which is a new steamship manga. So I read volume 1. This was recommended to me by Shae, and I had seen Shae and Izzy talk about it because they've been reading through some of the steamship manga. And Shae actually recommended this book to me in the birthday live stream that I did this weekend. So I'll leave that linked on the screen. And in fact, all of them recommended a book that they wanted me to read, and I'm planning on hopefully reading them over the next couple of weeks because why not? I've thrown the rest of my TBR out the window, so we might as well just read some things that have been recommended recently. So Ladies on Top is an adult manga. It is about a couple who are dating and who are struggling in the bedroom because of reasons. And they at first don't really communicate what those reasons are to one another. And as it turns out, the heroine in the book is not someone who likes being treated like a princess. She figures out she likes to be aggressive, she likes to be in charge in the bedroom. And the hero wants to be the guy that takes care of everyone, but in the bedroom, that's not enough to help him feel a connection with someone and to get involved in what's happening. He really needs a woman to take charge, but he feels shame that that is what he needs because of gender roles in society. And so this volume is really the two of them trying to work out a dynamic and trying to communicate to one another that yes, she likes to be in charge, and yes, he likes to be submissive in the bedroom, and how that's going to work. So I'm very, very eager to see how this series progresses, because at the end of the first volume, we really get to that point where they're like, okay, we understand that this is what the other person wants. And I'm very much looking forward to it. So this is one I'm definitely going to keep an eye on. So in Australia, you can get this on Kindle or Comixology, but it's not available in physical form yet. I think it comes out in October. So this is one that I'll definitely purchase and add to my shelves because I really enjoyed it and I'm looking forward to continuing it. All right, so those are the books that I read this week. In the comments, I would love to know what you have been reading over the last week, or if you have read any of these books, feel free to have a chat to me about them down there as well. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a dragon emoji down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you're in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.